She tried to discredit him on live TV. His response? It changed everything. The email landed in Darius Bell's inbox late in the afternoon. A formal message from the producers of The Morning Exchange, one of the most watched talk shows in the country. They wanted him, the CEO of Innovis, to be a guest on their upcoming segment about diversity in business. For most, it would feel like an honor. But for Darius, the invitation stirred something uneasy. He'd seen this before. Mainstream platforms suddenly shining a spotlight on black entrepreneurs, only to move on just as quickly once the applause faded. But this time was different. Innovis wasn't just another startup. The company had just secured a multimillion-dollar defense contract, outbidding some of the most powerful names in tech. That wasn't luck. It was 20 years of relentless work. Still, he hesitated. Something about it didn't sit right. His assistant, Tasha, noticed. "You sure about this?" she asked, her tone edged with concern. They love a success story, but they love tearing one down even more. Darius leaned back, folding his arms. "I'll handle it. Besides, it's national exposure. Let's see what they have to say." But deep down, he already knew. If this was a setup, they were playing chess with the wrong man. What Darius didn't realize was how far they were willing to go. And once the cameras started rolling, there would be no turning back. The morning of the interview, Darius stepped into the KXNT studios in Los Angeles. The air in the green room was crisp, almost sterile. A young producer greeted him without even looking up from her clipboard. "Mr. Bell, thanks for being here. We'll mic you up in 5. No warmth, no conversation, just business." As he sat in the makeup chair, an assistant dabbed powder across his face with robotic indifference. On the wall, a monitor displayed the live broadcast, celebrity scandals, a cooking demo, and then the words that made his jaw tighten. Coming up next, the black tech boom. Is it talent or special treatment? So this was the angle. He adjusted his suit jacket, steadying himself. If they thought they were about to corner him, they were in for a surprise. The set itself was dressed in soft blues and warm golds, deceptively inviting. Cameras hovered like silent predators, ready to catch every flicker of expression. Across from him sat Madeline Royce, the anchor known for her polished charm and razor-sharp questions. She smiled as he took his seat, but her eyes told another story. What Darius didn't know yet was that she wasn't here to celebrate him. She was here to dismantle him, piece by piece, live in front of millions. The lights flared on, the red tally light blinked, and just like that, they were live. "Darius Bell," Madeline began, her voice smooth, professional. "CEO of Innovis. A true American success story." Darius offered a polite nod. "Appreciate you having me." She leaned in, eyes scanning her cue cards. "Your company recently secured a $200 million government contract, outbidding some of the biggest names in the industry. Impressive." It was the classic opening move. Build him up before tearing him down. Darius answered carefully. "We developed a security encryption system that outperformed our competitors." Simple as that. Madeline's smile didn't waver, but her tone shifted. "Some call it groundbreaking, but others raise questions. Some experts suggest Innovis benefited from federal diversity incentives, that perhaps this wasn't only about being the best, but about meeting a quota." There it was. The trap. Darius let the silence hang, then leaned forward slightly. "Funny, isn't it? When a black entrepreneur wins, it's called special treatment. But when legacy firms, run by the same families for generations, win those same contracts, no one questions it." The air in the studio shifted. The producers off-camera exchanged quick glances. But Madeline? She didn't flinch. Rehook. Because this was just the beginning. Her next question would cut deeper, and it was designed to expose him. Madeline's polished smile sharpened. She set aside one card, as if preparing her blade. "You grew up in Birmingham, Alabama?" she began smoothly. "Single mother. Public schools. Worked your way up from nothing. Inspiring, truly." Darius gave a slow nod. He knew this setup. Compliment first, then the strike. "But here's what some might wonder," Madeline continued, her tone tightening. "How does someone with no Ivy League background No deep family ties, no Wall Street connections. Go from a struggling neighborhood to outbidding billion-dollar corporations. Did someone pull strings for you, Mr. Bell? The question hung in the air like smoke, heavy with implication. Darius tilted his head, considering his words. It's called work, Madeline. Some of us don't have generational wealth or country club networks to lean on. So we build from the ground up. Her pen tapped lightly against her cue cards. But surely you had help. Maybe a mentor, a program, something that gave you that extra push. Darius exhaled quietly, his voice steady. Help looked like working 3 jobs while earning my engineering degree. I looked like I was sleeping in my office because I couldn't afford rent while building my first prototype. That's the help I had. For the first time, Madeline's smile wavered, just slightly. The producers leaned forward. The tension was thick, but she wasn't finished. Because the next card she pulled wasn't about his past. It was about dismantling his very right to sit in that chair. Madeline shuffled her cue cards again, her expression controlled, but her eyes gleamed with the confidence of someone certain they had the upper hand. And yet, she said smoothly, some would argue that black entrepreneurs today have more opportunities than ever. Affirmative action, minority business grants, federal incentives. Aren't those doors already open wider than they were decades ago? Darius leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His voice was calm, but each word landed like a strike. You know what's funny? When a black business owner succeeds, people ask which programs helped us. But no one asks which bank loan helped a white-owned startup. No one asks which family friend got them into Stanford. No one questions which golf buddy invested in their company. The truth is, people like me had to be twice as good just to get a seat at the table. A ripple of silence passed over the studio. Even the crew members off-camera froze, realizing this was no longer the scripted success story fluff they'd expected. But Madeline didn't back off. She crossed her legs, voice smooth as glass. So you're saying these programs didn't give you an advantage? That your rise wasn't helped along by a system eager to highlight diversity? Darius chuckled softly, shaking his head. Let's be real, if I weren't exceptional at what I do, I wouldn't be sitting in this chair. Diversity didn't get me here. Determination did. But Madeline wasn't done. Her next move would be bolder, riskier, and designed to corner him live in front of millions. Madeline adjusted in her chair, her polished smile never faltering, but her tone cooled by a degree. She turned slightly toward the cameras, playing not just to Darius, but to the millions watching at home. Darius, she said evenly, you present yourself as a self-made success. But let's talk about perception. Some believe black entrepreneurs like you actually receive too much attention. That the narrative of overcoming struggle is more marketable than the thousands of white business owners who work just as hard but don't get the same headlines. The words hung in the air like a challenge, sharp and deliberate. Darius let out a quiet laugh. So let me get this straight. In a world where 90% of Fortune 500 CEOs are white men, where tech funding still overwhelmingly goes to white-owned startups, the real issue is that people like me get too much press. For the first time, Madeline's smile flickered. She hadn't expected him to laugh. He pressed on, voice steady, measured. We're not being celebrated because it's convenient. We're being noticed because, for once, the barriers we've been breaking are too big to ignore. Madeline tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, regaining composure. I'm just pointing out that, in today's climate, there may be pressure to highlight diversity over pure merit. Darius leaned forward, his gaze locking with hers. Do you really believe I'd be here if I weren't exceptional? You think I climbed this high on optics alone? Madeline's eyes hardened. Her next move wouldn't be about perception. It would strike at the heart of his success itself. Darius let her words hang in the air, refusing to flinch. So, he said calmly, you're saying my achievements aren't mine? Vanessa leaned back with a practiced smirk. I'm saying you're a good story, Mr. Bell. But behind the story, is always the same. Connections, tokenism, a bit of luck. You can't convince people otherwise. The audience murmured uneasily, some nodding, others visibly uncomfortable with her bluntness. Darius could sense the tension tightening. This was the trap. Push him into anger, make him lash out, and she would paint him as aggressive, emotional, unprofessional. He'd seen this tactic before, and he knew better than to play her game. Instead, he smiled. Interesting, because when I applied for my first loan, no one mentioned tokenism. They told me I didn't look trustworthy. When I pitched my first idea, no one opened doors. I had them slammed in my face. So if I'm here today, it's not because someone handed me a ticket. It's because I built the stage myself. The audience clapped, some even cheering. Vanessa's smirk faltered for just a moment. But then she recovered, tilting her head. That's a nice speech, but people need proof, Mr. Bell. Stories aren't enough. Darius's eyes glinted. Proof? Funny you should say that. I brought some. Gasps rippled through the crowd as he reached into his folder. Vanessa blinked. This wasn't in the script. The day of the talk show finally arrived. The studio buzzed with cameras, producers, and a live audience eager for drama. Darius stepped onto the stage with calm confidence, dressed sharply but without excess flash. Opposite him sat Cynthia Ward, a seasoned TV host known for her sharp tongue and subtle jabs. From the start, her tone was clear. She wasn't here to celebrate him. So, Mr. Bell, Cynthia began, leaning forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Some say you're more of a lucky opportunist than a true innovator. What do you say to critics who think you're just playing the system? The audience shifted uncomfortably. The question was meant to corner him, to discredit him live. Cameras zoomed in, waiting for a stumble. Darius didn't flinch. Instead, he paused, letting silence speak before his words did. I say, he replied evenly, that if building a company from scratch, creating thousands of jobs, and mentoring the next generation of entrepreneurs is playing the system, then maybe the system needs more players like me. The crowd erupted in applause. Cynthia's smirk faltered for the first time. Darius had turned her trap into a platform. But he wasn't finished. He leaned closer to the mic. And for those wondering if I belong here, look around. I didn't ask for this stage. It asked for me. The audience rose to their feet. What was meant to be his humiliation had become his triumph. The day of the big launch finally arrived. Innovis had secured a prime spot at the Tech Future Expo, a global stage where the world's brightest companies unveiled their latest breakthroughs. Cameras flashed as Darius and his team set up their booth, showcasing their groundbreaking AI system that promised to revolutionize supply chain management. For weeks, excitement had been building, and potential investors were flying in from around the world. Darius had rehearsed his pitch countless times. He was confident until disaster struck. Just minutes before his scheduled presentation, the system crashed. The main demo screen went black, and the software refused to restart. Panic spread across the booth as whispers from competitors and skeptical journalists filled the air. Darius's heart pounded. This wasn't just a technical hiccup. It was a public failure unfolding in real time. He could see doubt forming in the eyes of investors who had come expecting a flawless showcase. Some began to leave, shaking their heads. Others pulled out their phones, recording the chaos. For a brief moment, Darius felt crushed, the weight of humiliation pressing down on him. But then he remembered his mother's words. Setbacks aren't the end. They're the test. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, deciding to face the crowd without fear, determined to salvage what remained of this pivotal moment. The words hung heavy in the air. Judge Thompson's gavel struck once, echoing like thunder across the hushed courtroom. Every eye shifted toward Kendrick, whose calm presence stood in sharp contrast to the chaos unraveling around him. The defense attorney shuffled his papers nervously, clearly caught off guard by the sudden turn of events. Mr. Robinson, the judge said firmly, you claim to have evidence that contradicts the testimony we just heard. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Kendrick replied, his voice steady, carrying both respect and authority. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a neatly organized folder. Inside this file are signed witness statements, time-stamped photos, and official records that prove the timeline presented by the defense is false. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor leaned forward eagerly, sensing the case shifting in their favor. Meanwhile, the defendant's face turned pale, his confidence evaporating with every passing second. The judge gestured for the bailiff to retrieve the folder. As the documents were handed over, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The weight of the truth was about to crash down, and everyone knew it. Kendrick stood tall, not out of pride, but with the quiet conviction of a man who had walked into the fire to ensure justice prevailed. The air in the precinct felt heavy as Chief Robinson leaned forward, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. Every word you've spoken tonight, every lie, every insult, it's all recorded. The cameras are on. The city will see what really happens behind these walls. A wave of panic spread through the room. Officer Daniels stammered, his face pale. "Why you can't do this? You'll ruin us all." "Ruin you?" Robinson's eyes locked on him. "No. You ruined yourselves the moment you thought abuse of power was acceptable." The silence shattered when Officer Ramirez, the youngest in the room, finally spoke. "Chief, I didn't know it would go this far. I wanted to do the right thing, but I was scared." Robinson softened his tone slightly. "It takes courage to admit that, son. But fear is no excuse for standing by while others destroy lives. You want redemption? Then stand with the truth now." Ramirez swallowed hard, then nodded. "I'll testify. I'll back the recordings. I'm done covering for them." The room turned to chaos, voices overlapping, excuses spilling, officers scrambling to save themselves. But Robinson didn't flinch. He had forced the cracks to show, and now the entire structure of corruption was beginning to collapse under its own weight. The studio lights dimmed slightly as the moderator called for the final round of discussion. Selena leaned forward, her voice sharp, her words carefully chosen to cut. "Viewers deserve transparency. What kind of leader hides behind rehearsed statements and avoids addressing the real issues?" She smirked, confident she had cornered Darius. The audience murmured, some nodding, others frowning. Darius inhaled slowly, his composure steady. "I believe in action over empty sound bites," he replied, his tone calm but resonant. "But since you've brought up transparency, let's talk about yours." His gaze locked on Selena, unwavering. "The truth is, you emailed my team weeks ago asking for investment in your personal project. When we declined, suddenly my credibility became your target. Isn't that right?" The studio fell silent. Selena's expression froze, then flickered with unease. The control room panicked. Camera operators exchanged quick glances. Viewers at home were glued to their screens. Selena stammered, trying to recover, but the damage was done. Darius didn't need to raise his voice or insult her. His words had shifted the narrative entirely. What was meant to be his undoing had become her exposure. The audience erupted, not with confusion this time, but with applause. The balance of power had changed. The air in the courtroom was so heavy it felt like time itself was holding its breath. After hours of deliberation, the jury filed back in, faces unreadable. Kendrick sat tall, though his pulse raced in his chest. Across the room, the defense team looked restless, their confidence clearly shaken by the testimony and evidence laid bare. The judge's voice broke the silence. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreperson stood, holding the folded paper as if it carried the weight of justice itself. "We have, Your Honor." Every eye fixed on that slip of paper. Kendrick gripped the edge of the table, his jaw tight, his mother whispering a prayer under her breath from the gallery. The words that followed seemed to hang in the air before crashing down like thunder. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty." Gasps erupted across the courtroom. Relief washed over Kendrick, though it was mixed with the gravity of the moment. Years of arrogance, deceit, and abuse had finally met accountability. The judge thanked the jury and ordered sentencing to proceed. Kendrick exhaled slowly, realizing justice was not just a dream. It had become reality. The courtroom erupted in stunned silence. Judge Matthews' gavel struck, echoing like thunder. Kendrick Robinson had not only won his case, he had exposed a deep rot that stretched far beyond his own trial. The officers involved were suspended, the department launched into a full investigation, and the city had no choice but to acknowledge the truth it had tried to bury. But for Kendrick, victory wasn't just legal, it was personal. For the first time, he felt seen. His daughter clutched his hand, her tears proof that his fight hadn't been in vain. Outside, cameras flashed, reporters shouted, and strangers reached out in support. The same man once painted as a criminal now stood tall as a symbol of resilience. Judge Matthews approached him quietly after the hearing. "You've done more than win a case, Mr. Robinson. You've changed the system." Kendrick nodded, not out of pride, but out of resolve. This was bigger than him. As he stepped into the sunlight, he realized his life had shifted forever. He was no longer just a man wronged. He was a man who turned injustice into change. And as the city whispered his name, Kendrick Robinson became more than a defendant. He became a legacy.